Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us tonight for a very exciting talk on very timely topic by a great speaker. We'll enjoy the great talk today. But before that, we have a few logistic and introduction to go through with a few minutes. So first of all, we thank AIAA for the wonderful Zoom platform and their full support. And this recording, this event is being recorded and it will be posted online. And you will receive an email for the notice. And thanks to our speaker, Mr. Niebuhr today. Also, if any question, please type in Q&A and more toward the end. You can click raise hand in the Q&A session. This way, you can have a discussion, speak out your question or speak or answer from the Q&A box as well. Just a few quick words about AIAA. AIAA, as you know, is a nonprofit organization, membership-based, professional organization promoting aerospace. It has strong presence in United States, in the nation, but also have international presence. Our section chair right now is Dr. Jeff Pushel. Our executive director is Daniel Dambacher, President Basil Hassan, and across many countries headquartered in Virginia. So different level of membership, professional, early career is actually also professional. Right now we have free educator membership and high school membership. So just a few words about our great volunteer, Dr. Jeff Pushel, Sherry from JPL, Curtis from Boeing, Jennifer is attorney, aerospace attorney, and RP is a great educator. So many, and Luis, education from Lockheed, and Daniel from USC, Lynn from Northrop Grumman, and then many more. We work together and to assist the community. And a very important part, AIAA is a technical committee. It's a national organization and is actually one of the interesting core of AIAA. And you also have Engage, Daily Launch, Aerospace America, and the discount for forums. And also membership, you can advance your membership. For example, our speaker last week, Dr. Mark Lewis on hypersonic, he was our honorary fellow. Our section chair, Dr. Pushel, is a fellow. And you also got awards, if you say this, Dr. Bedwalacqua, he invented the VTOL engine, and he got the Guggenheim Awards. And the Honda CEO, he got the Reed Awards. Student membership, you can apply, the scholarship, those things. And national forums used to be 5, but now the propulsion energy seems to be, kind of on the side. So 4 major forums. And Southern California, like LA-LV section, has very strong connection to the industry. As you know, there's a very vibrant space community and great heritage. And Northrop Grumman had just launched the James Webb telescope. That's really amazing. And they have new companies, Launcher Space and Relativity Space, Rocket Lab, Ampere, 3D Malls. We keep having events, to keep people network together, and also newsletter. So if you have anything, welcome. So our speaker today, Scott, is the director of the cyber engineering at the Aerospace Corporation. Aerospace Corporation, as you know, has very strong program in cybersecurity, and he is the director of it. And Scott is currently the director of cyber engineering at the aerospace, providing program protection and the cybersecurity engineering support to the United States Space Force, Air Force, and other space customers. As a liaison for Space System Command's Chief Information Officer, CIO, is a technical advisor to the government leading teams in areas of architecturing, secure software development, test and evaluation, and the supply chain risk management. All these are very important. Scott served his active duty enlistment in the United States Air Force in Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Central South America. He graduated with a bachelor degree from New School University in New York, and he graduated from Capella University with a Master of Science degree in Information Technology, Information Security. He is currently certified chief information security officer, a certified information system security professional, and a project management professional PMP. All these are very exciting. So without further ado, let's welcome our speaker today. For a very exciting topic. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. What an introduction. I don't know how exciting project management professional is, but I'll take it. Thanks. I know, Ken, it's been a while. We've been trying to do this. So thanks again for the introduction. I'll just go ahead and see if I can take over the share screen here if you let me. Okay, I see it down here. We should get started on the queue. All right. Everyone should be ready to go. Okay. Just slide over so I can actually see the folks on the Zoom call. Well, like Ken mentioned, we tried to do this some time ago, probably 2-3 years ago before COVID. So we're at least we're doing it via Zoom. I've run security programs for Fortune 500 companies. Leading risk assessments, but now not only looking, for gaps in systems, but also best practices, trying to find best practices. So it's not only looking for, things that can go wrong, but it's also looking for some really, positive things along the way. And as such, you can reduce costs by doing this, and bring to bear an economy of scale. But tonight's really going to be focused on, protecting critical technologies. And this is something I've done before products were brought to market. And so when I speak, it's not just relative to maybe the DoD federal space. I'm really talk broad and wide overall industries. I brought some of these processes and just for ease of use and scalability. So when I talk in generalities, there's frameworks and things as such, but think about scalability. If you can apply it in one area, then, think larger than that. And we'll hopefully go through some of these methodologies that you can use. So a little bit about me. I think it's important. I'm sharing this about myself. I don't normally like to talk about myself, but perspective matters. I'm probably an outlier when it comes to some of the work I do. Up on the upper left, you see I was born in Jersey, right across from Manhattan in New York City, and I grew up in a place called Jersey City. Went to school there, and my time spent in New York City, you'll see on the upper right. By the time I was in high school, I was playing with Commodore 64s and phone phreaking and hitting up BBSs, that's bulletin board systems, trading games and wares and things like that. But I was also going to hardcore shows and a place called CBGB. So I'm coming from a different perspective, and I think than most. But that really, I think it kind of sets the stage in a different perspective. And many of the folks in cybersecurity that I run across really don't come from maybe some traditional backgrounds. So just think about that kind of, we all come from different backgrounds, and everyone has something, interesting to bring. You did mention my enlistment time. See on the bottom left, you'll see here, this is my very first TDY, temporary duty. I was on my way to Africa and stopped off in Ascension Island, and would come to play later on in my career. Ascension Island was used during the Falkland Wars. But it's also used as communication site, and just being around that type of environment and technology early on in my career was fruitful later on when I was dealing with some of these comm sites, for other activities. Some other pictures. This was where we were headed to on that particular TDY that was on the bottom left is in Angola. This is a very interesting place. We had to fly in during the daytime and not at night, because they'd shoot us down with AAA, that's anti-aircraft artillery. And then the other pictures there is South America. So I'm coming from a different perspective. I guess you could say, though, my professional career started, second professional career started when I started with Boeing. And then also I spent some time at Booz Allen Hamilton. My time at Boeing, probably the biggest takeaway was that saying is finding a way. And they're really, stressed this root cause analysis, really finding, solutions and getting to the bottom of particular problems. So I can tell you that kind of just carries through the way my processes and my methodologies today. Booz Allen, one of the things a big takeaway from Booz Allen, my work at Booz, was this value of my time. I knew how much clients were being charged for my hourly time, and so I really kind of understood, okay, yeah, my time's worth something, and all of our team members' time's worth something. So appreciate anyone that has been dialed in and on this call right now. So time is valuable. The other part I learned from Booz was this idea of follow-on work. Okay, you always got to be forward-thinking and anticipate future problems. So when I'm speaking today, then, that's my perspective. That's where I'm coming from. I worked a number of different programs at Boeing, and I ended up working majority of my time with as a direct report for the chief security officer at Boeing. And so the processes I learned were really enterprise-wide and used for scalability. So, sure. So this picture right here you're seeing is taken on campus at LMU. I teach one night a week. I teach a series of cybersecurity courses at LMU, and I think this is exactly where I think cybersecurity needs to be. It fits in very nicely under system security engineering. It's a multidisciplinary approach. But also, throughout my career, I've started an increase on, there's an increased focus on supply chain risk management. So I'll be talking a little bit, about supply chain risk management as well. So if you think that, there's things that you may want to see and talk about when I'm done presenting or along the way, don't hesitate to raise your hand or put something in the chat. I'm not actually monitoring the chat box on here, but maybe Ken can interrupt, and don't hesitate if you want to interrupt. So I'm going to move on to the next chart. If you'd like to participate in this poll everywhere, I'll give you a minute or two to log in. You can either text or log in. I'm going to go ahead and activate this poll. So I'm going to have to stop this share real quick. Okay, I want to make sure I have to get it activated. Works much better when we're in person, but hopefully you'll be able to see it too. I'm gonna put it back up and share it. So, and then present. All right, just gotta slide it over on my other screen, and hopefully it will be without a delay, too much of a delay here. Okay.
Is there a way you could share the link to the poll in the chat?
Yep. Okay. Let me get my chat window open. So we may have some folks just dialed in also, correct? Or
Yeah, mostly, not on the phone. They're mostly, I think they have internet access.
okay. So I'll put the text one if people are on phones, or if you would just want the web address, I can put it in. I'm just going to type it in instead of a cut and paste. And I'm assuming everyone can see that correctly. Is that true?
Did you post it to everyone?
It just should be.
Yes, show up. Yeah. No, you need to select everyone. Let me. Well, I can do it from this end.
And we'll go to responses. Okay, so about 50-50 right now. This will help shape the conversation. Okay, so PM scientist, good. And I grabbed some of these, you know, just from the website, just get an idea of the membership activity and at least who's on the line. Yeah, sysadmin is, you know, a lot of cybersecurity folks come in through a networking background, and usually kind of you cut your chops doing those types of activities. Okay, so really trying to help shape the discussion. It seems like you know, maybe in architecture, engineering, comm network. Okay, we certainly can cover that. And this is more for me, just kind of my understanding of, you know, where are people coming from, what they think is the most important. I don't know if that's working correctly, because I'm not seeing it move, or perhaps I'd have to wait for it to be over. Okay. And we'll move on to the biggest threat. Again, this usually works better when there's a live audience and people can, you know, play around. Rootkits, okay. A human, probably nation state, adversary, the human factor, okay. Good. Verification. I'm thinking, is that software verification? It might have been with the word cloud. And then just kind of an overall idea of, okay, what is cybersecurity? Yeah, the title is Protecting Critical Technologies. Well, we'll touch on cybersecurity, obviously. I've got a strong background in it, but I want to cover kind of an overarching and more holistic approach, because the discipline does cover quite a bit. Virtual world protection. That's true. Yeah, it's not just the networks anymore and systems. IP. That's probably a big part of the discussion, especially if you're not working on the Department of Defense side. You know, IP is what critical for your business to operate. And then identity theft, yeah, from the personal side. Okay, we'll move along here. And then just kind of get an idea of, you know, whatever the role is you may perform, it may be different than kind of what your background is, what your title is. You know, sometimes we do have additional duties, and I'm just curious to see, yeah, okay, exactly. That's jack of all trades covers additional duties, right? Mission resiliency and protection. Yeah, that's a good one. That covers quite a bit too. Admin, software, and network development. Chief bottle washer. Yeah, and user. Yeah, well, you could just be a user too. And I know we may have some students on as well as they're part of the membership. So I, was hoping, okay, maybe there'd be yeah, something along those lines. I think there's maybe one more. Okay, what topic? And I'm going to make sure. I do have the poll everywhere I can go back to. It saves, but I'll write some of these down if things pop up. What do you want to cover? Take this time to have some tea.
Give a few moments here because it takes a while to type.
Yeah, the freeform text ones usually takes a bit. Testing. Online protection techniques. FPGAs, okay. We'll cover that a little bit. Field program with Gatorade. If you want to get into some things we can do. Sure. Okay, quite a bit on this word cloud. All right. Well, I'm going to stop that and kind of go back to the main presentation and kill that for now. But so yeah, I got a good idea of what everyone wants to what everyone wants to hear about. So I'll do my best to try and cover as much as I can. So thank you for participating in the poll everywhere. All right. Now you should be able to see my screen. Is this correct? Is that a true statement? Okay, maybe give me a thumbs up or just a verbal yes. I'm still screen sharing. Very good. Can you see it okay? No, I'm not hearing anything. So I'll restart the screen share. Maybe it dropped out. Okay. I'll reshare on 2. How about that? Can you see it okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'll just have to, give me a second. I'm just moving my my PowerPoint around here. Okay. So, okay, here it's on a different, seen on a different slide. Maybe if I advance it, it'll work better. Well, no, for some reason it's it's not showing that one. Give me a second. Let me kill this one and reopen it. I think it's getting confused with too many shares happening. All right, this should do it. All right. All right. So good. You can see the screen on there. Advanced slide.
Oh no,
Is it okay?
no slides.
Okay. Well, I got to go back in here and put it on again. Here it is. I'll just put it on PowerPoint instead of the entire screen. So it's sharing the app instead of the screen. How about now? Does that work?
Yeah, you see the
poll everywhere? Okay, good. So the first thing we should talk about is identifying your mission. If you're working in the DoD or intelligence community, generally your system is designed to have a mission, right? If you don't have a mission, then why are you building, right? Well, it'd be a waste of taxpayer money. Or if you're working for a business, why are you building it? So maybe, can you give me, some ideas, like what would be like the most important thing about your system, right? If you're talking a communication satellite, it would be, the communication features that you're providing. And then you kind of go down the list of, okay, well, what do you need to do, for the system, to provide that function of communication. So, but the first really thing is identify what is your core mission. You may have multiple missions on your systems, right? It may be designed to perform a multitude of different things, but you really want to focus on what really is truly and important to your mission. And if you're talking in a business sense, it would be what's important to your business. And you got to think about, okay, well, what services maybe this system provides, to others. So don't just think about, okay, this system does X, Y, Z, but also think of maybe the end users or some residual users that you may not be aware of. And that'll really help you protect what's really most important. And that's, I think I'm gonna, stress with this conversation and discussion is, we should really be focused on what's truly most important to your systems, and because we can't protect it all, unfortunately. At least in the area of cybersecurity and overall protection, there's just not enough resources to protect everything. So getting this part down is very crucial. There's a number of different ways you can find out what your mission is, but generally speaking, if you're on one particular project or program, you're going to know what your mission is. It may be very high level, but that's okay, because that's where you start. So don't think too much about all the intricacies, because we're going to dig down and we do analysis along the way. But you got to really think and focus. Okay, what is truly the core mission? On the Department of Defense side, the DoD side, it's clearly spelled out in a number of documents. I didn't want this briefing to be about all those documents. I could share enough of them in the chat, and I'll be sure to provide references. There's plenty of documentation that tells you where you'd go and find some of these things, but essentially it would be your key performance parameters, things of that nature would then help support your mission. So move on to the next slide. Once you figured out, what your mission is, you want to conduct a criticality analysis. And here, you can call it a CA, or in the business term, it's a business impact analysis. And at this time too, if you're in the DoD, you would be conducting a critical program information determination. What's so critical about your information that you are trying to protect. I like to think of the criticality analysis as, or you're trying to keep the bad stuff out, right? And then the critical program information is all the information you're kind of keep and protect close hold. It's a very simple analogy, but it applies in the case when we're talking about protecting critical technologies. And I use the term technologies, it could cover processes as well. It doesn't have to be a particular component. You may have a very unique way of manufacturing that is exclusive to you or your business or your program, and you want to protect that. One of the programs I supported, X37, we worked with composites, right? Just the manufacturing process alone is very unique. How many plies you put down, you think of, the software and the model-based systems engineering, use all those types of things is an overall process. You want to protect that stuff. You don't want that to get out, because then a competitor can get it in the hands of a competitor, or worse, an adversary get a hold of it, and they can duplicate it. So all that money you spend on research and development, all the effort and all the engineering effort you put into it is for nothing. So that's what is done at this stage, is when you do this analysis. And during this stage, it really helps understand the impact of the outages and disruptions to your system. Because when you find out what's most critical, well, then you find out, oh, wow, if we don't have this particular component or part, or if it degrades to a certain level, we're hosed, then our system doesn't operate at where we want it to be. So this part also defines the priorities and which functions of the system or the processes need to be recovered most quickly. I mentioned that part of it because there's this term, and I saw one of the poll results was mission assurance and this piece of resiliency. Well, right now we've got to be able to operate our systems through a cyber attack. Yes, also we have to operate through maybe a kinetic attack, but there's this idea of resiliency. Okay, what would it take so we can maintain at least the minimum baseline to operate through a cyber attack? Now, if it's your business, well, what can you do to recover as quickly as possible so you can go back into business and start making money again? In this case, I'll give an example. If you're a web-based company and your retail outlet on your have customers it's all web-facing traffic, and then your payment system goes down. Well, if you're not generating the revenue coming in, you probably want that back in a fast order. So that would be one of your priorities. But this also helps minimize technology compromise. What I mean by that is it helps minimize the fact that, okay, the technology doesn't get compromised before its time, let's say. When we're developing systems, sometimes we know that there's only a certain amount of lifetime before, let's say, our adversary gets a hold of it. It should be factored in, and it should be factored in so you can, protect what's most important and then put the resources that are needed for that, and then not worry about so many things that, okay, we know it's probably kind of out there already. And that kind of goes back to the polar everywhere answer that someone put in for intellectual property. And many times, I go with the assumption that, if it's a standard system and it's an internet-facing system, it's probably someone's already on your system. Intellectual property, well, it depends on where that resides. That could be compromised or it could not be compromised already, but chances are, and you may find this out through, let's say, a merger and acquisition type activity, that, oh, guess what? That intellectual property that you thought was so valuable and that only your company is the only one that had it. Guess what? It's already being sold on the dark web or something. And then it comes as a real surprise sometimes when you're doing a merger and acquisition and there's some due diligence activities that go on. And guess what? Your company's not worth as much as what you thought it was because of that, because you're betting on your intellectual property being, your crown jewels. So this phase, we ID the critical components, or in the case of a business, let's say, the crown jewels of your company. You should be able to provide a quantitative and qualitative analysis when you're doing this. And maybe later, if there's time, I can help walk you through some of the steps that you can take to do that. In this area, we identify critical mission threads, again, if you're in the DoD side, and then the components that support those threads. This is very similar to what's called the FMICA. Anyone online familiar with that term? You can just go off mute and join in if you are.
Is it on the analysis slide or is it on a different slide?
No, this is the FMICA is on this slide. So yeah, are you familiar with that term?
It's not on this slide, actually. You're on the analysis slide.
Yeah. I'm just saying it. Maybe I'll see if I can type it in the chat here. If I can get this chat window open again. Normally I keep another one going. So FMICA is FMECA. It's a failure mode, effect, and criticality analysis. So it's very similar to what's done in the civil aviation industry. It was, I think, developed early in the 40s, late 40s and 50s, and later matured in the 60s and published, for everyone to use. But it's the civil aviation use it's very similar to how they combine FMEA and then a fault tree analysis. What this does is, provides an end-to-end functional decomposition of a system. and helps reduce the vulnerability to the functions and the components by what we start off with, which is decomposing this architecture, system architecture, and then aligning these technologies and threats with determining the overall impact to the system, to the functions and those components. It's a very methodical process. The DoD has it has it published in documentation to follow along step by step. But hopefully, at least from this conversation, you don't have to strictly follow it if you're not required to. You can enhance it. There's many things you can do to make it better. Just as long as you get the overall idea that you have to identify the main component that's providing the mission threads, and then decompose that even further. And it's through an architecture, logical diagrams, things of that nature. And you basically, follow the bit stream along. It's like, okay, we start here and then we go along the path and say, if this somehow fails along the way, along this path, what harm could it do? Could it degrade the system, or totally reduce its capability so it don't function at all? So this really just helps us to understand and consider the risks, and along the way, the supply chain risk that may be associated with that particular component. Okay. So when this criticality analysis, we use the same classification as same severity classification. It's catastrophic. It's 1 through 4, 4 being catastrophic. No, sorry, one is catastrophic, 2 is critical, 3 is marginable, and 4 is negligible. These are the reverse effects on it. So you don't have to use 1 through 4 if you're a company or particular program. If you use other types of methods to identify the criticality of your systems, you can use them. It's just 1 through 4 is kind of the standard within the DoD. And I'll go ahead and I'll put some information in the chat, so then you can go ahead and research some of this more, online at your leisure. So along these, with a lot of this information is provided in what's called program protection planning, and that's kind of where the background for all of this that I'm coming from began, and now in let's say in 2012 is when it started getting pushed into official formal policy, where you started to have to do it, part of better buying power. And so these documents are all available out there for you to use, and hopefully, mature your programs, or if your business, you can use them for your businesses. But there is also some commercial alignment here. The ISO has a series on business continuity management and for their system. So ISO series, again, is an international series of standards, right? That you as a company, if you're going to agree to participate in the marketplace, you're probably using ISO standards to some effect. And there is some commercial alignment there within their business continuity management and planning. So I'll move on to the next chart. So while we're still on here, you see there's critical components and CPI. And then if you're on the business side, you'll have these priorities and dependencies, but it's very similar, just maybe different terminologies. And so here's why business impact analysis is important. This was from a Romanian document that outlined it. I mean, their analysis resulted in saying that the business impact analysis is the most relevant element in understanding how an organization functions. And together with this other piece of it, the tail piece of it, is performing a risk assessment. I'm not going to cite the calculations that they came up with, but it was, at least it was a methodical approach they took to say, we knew for years that, you got to conduct a business impact analysis. At least in cybersecurity, it's one of the first things that you have to do, find out what's most critical to your systems. If you're studying for any of the certifications, you can bet there's going to be questions on it, on business impact analysis. But, so it's important, but this actually, this particular analysis, provides that to us and shows this. It's really important because if you want to protect your system overall and holistically, you have to start with this BIA. So I mentioned kind of my my background and where I was coming from, and that I come from this very broad range. I started when I started with Boeing, I was actually hired in to do physical security, be the physical security subject matter expert, right? But when you take the field of InfoSec or cybersecurity, it's much broader than that because it covers a lot of these other disciplines, especially if you're a small, medium business, or even a large business. There's all these other types of security functions and disciplines that go along with it. I've got personnel. I've got operations, which is OPSEC. You may have communication security. With the poll everywhere results we saw up there, someone's interested about communication security. Well, right now, if you're within the DoD space, you're probably familiar with encryption. That's how we protect communications. Encryption is very important. Yes, we do it on on the commercial side, maybe to a certain extent. It's gotten popular now for personal home use with VPNs and such like that. But the encryption, when you're talking about mission systems, and like I said, when you've got national security type systems, the encryption has to be very secure and built into your architecture, right? So that's a whole discipline into itself. We know that encryption is only good for a certain amount of time. Devices and the whole architecture can get sunsetted after a while because we know adversaries can figure out ways to go ahead and break the keys, right? Especially with quantum computing. I didn't see that pop up on the poll because that's something that's kind of come up over the past years. It's like, okay, with the advances in quantum, what's it going to do for our encryption schemas? But that's something you have to think about when you're building out your architecture. Encryption is very important. Where are you going to place those encryption points? All right. And, in some cases, you may require really high bandwidth, right? And if you put encryption in wrong, let's say, throat points and bottlenecks, then you're going to provide yourself with your own denial of service, and you're going to hose your system. If you provide so much encryption that your latency is too much, then your system will fail to operate. So these are all kind of factors that whether you're a cybersecurity professional or not, you have to factor in while you're designing and building systems. And then just, we mentioned software, I know popped up. Software is very important, and not just application software, just software in general. So those are some of the things that we're having much greater scrutiny on. And I'll go move on to the next slide. I didn't check out the Netflix movie yet, but I know that there's software is kind of being being blamed for a number of different causes. Not just the 737 MAX, but there's some incidents in what it was July of 2015 that caused a number of delays with United Airlines. At the same time, the stock exchange went down, and they called them glitches in software. And when I hear that term, I almost kind of cringe. It's like, well, is it really a glitch, or is it just the way things are coded, or maybe they didn't think overall end to end of how the system would operate? And performing some of those early tasks that I mentioned would help find some of those problems, at least when you're talking a system of system type mentality. If you test and you kind of build things in, and where your failure points on, you should be able to find even problems with your software. One thing I didn't mention, which I want to kind of land on the other side, is kind of been getting into this book here, this Chaos Engineering, and this is where the folks at Netflix actually built failure into their system. They created this thing called the Chaos Monkey. So they built failure into the system, so the system would fail at irregular intervals and rates and irregular intervals, just so they knew they could be more resilient. Excellent book if you want to kind of get into a little bit more of this different way of thinking of yeah, you know, we have to plan for the system to fail so we can best recover. So anyway, if anyone want to come off mute and anyone know anything about the 737 MAX a little bit and kind of you know, say their side of the story, what they think they know about it.
What I know about the 737 MAX is basically based on public information, but what I do know was there are a couple of things at play here. One, the lack of redundancy in the AOA probes to sense the. Second, the having a AOA alpha display in the cockpit was an optional feature, as was having a redundant AOA sensors, I believe. And thirdly, there was a human factors training issue, and as well as the I guess the human factors interface, in that pilots were not able to quickly recognize the situation and take appropriate action. It's probably math or something else.
That great synopsis. I threw this in kind of at the last minute because I was out to dinner on Saturday and met with you know, someone that worked, you know, previously with Boeing many years ago, and he didn't have any direct knowledge of it, but he mentioned the movie, and we got started talking about dinner, and I'm like, oh yeah, maybe. You know, maybe I'll bring it up on. Let me do some research, and you know, the charts pretty much show, you know, the at least the initial part of the problem. Okay, they want to sell, you know, more seats, so bigger engine, right? A lot of save fuel, whatever the reasons was, you know, you can bet it was economical, right? And so, but they from what I know, it sounded like they were trying to leverage too much on the software side. And here, that's why I said, and this is from the article, the IEEE article, Boeing's solution to its hardware problem was the software solution, and that obviously didn't work. I mean, it could work if you have all these other things in, right? The redundancy, which you mentioned, and then sensors, if you had enough sensors and things like that. And if the pilots were properly trained in this area, right? You know, okay, these are all things that you could maybe call in the risk world that I live in the cybersecurity world, these could be all countermeasures. You know, they could be all, okay, well, these are countermeasures to, let's say, a problem that you know that can cause a failure somewhere. I like the fact that you mentioned redundancies too, Santush. Hopefully I pronounced your name correctly, because that's one of those things we look for, that when we're doing a criticality analysis. If you're having, you know, triple redundancy in space systems, we've got a lot of redundancies because you can't just go swap out hardware and things like that. And software at one time, it was really difficult to push updates. But just because things are redundant does not necessarily mean it's critical, or it's those higher level critical components. But it's a good key to look for and hone in on when you're doing a criticality analysis. The thing with redundancy, though, it may not buy you what you need to address a supply chain issue. And the reason I say that is because a good analogy, I worked some Navy programs in the past, and person I worked with would always use the analogy of, it's like, well, we've got this really high end, you know, fancy, you know, race car, and then your tires, you know, keep blowing out when you're racing it, you know, and you know, so whatever your driver's side tire, you know, blows, and then you throw another tire on, right? Well, if you're getting them from the same supplier, you're not really buying anything else. And so that's why when we get to the supply chain risk management side of the house, you know, we try and do blind buys or double blind buys, things of that nature. We don't just get things from the same supplier, or we mask, you know, who it's actually going to. So this way, it may give you some level of confidence that you're getting, you know, different products along the way, and you're not getting the same, let's say, compromised product. So hopefully that makes sense.
I forgot to mention a couple of things here. One, the original cause of the problem was going back to the Boeing 737 was designed for short field operations at remote airports. So because of they designed the aircraft to ride lower, it does not have as long as a strut as other aircrafts, as the 757. And when they canceled 757, that left the 737 as the only aircraft that was single aisle, narrow body, that they decided to extend the size of it. Simultaneously, after the 737-200 series, they went from a low bypass turbofan to a high bypass turbofan with the CFM International CFM 56 engine, and that's when the problems began. That they had to, because you have a larger nacelle, they had to move the nacelle higher and forward in order to accommodate. Otherwise, it would hit the ground. That's why the nacelles of a 737-300 and higher are actually kind of flattened. They move the accessories to the side, so it looks like it's flattened on the intake. Then they went to the MAX. They put an even larger, more powerful engine, so they had to move it even further up and forward, and that changed the thrust line, and that was the root cause of it pitching up on takeoff, potentially putting it on a departure stall on takeoff. So that was the root cause. That's when they created MCAS to try to, like a fly-by-wire like design to try to use software to prevent the pilot from stalling the aircraft. Now, the other aspect of it is that there's been some debate. I know a former Northrop B2 test pilot said that, well, the way you disconnect MCAS is the same way you disconnect the autopilot for all Boeing 737s. You reach down and you hit the two cutoff switches, so you should just react the same way they all do. You have that versus whether it was usable and whether the pilot had enough time to react. So those are the two sides of the debate for these mishaps on the 737 MAX.
And excellent. The lower strut design that came up in I said conversation, dinner conversation too. So Brian, I think, did you have a question or you wanted to comment?
Oh yeah, it sounds like your last commenter was very well understanding the depth of the aerospace problem with regard to cybersecurity systems. But I'm wondering, with all this talk about the engineers talking about the systems interaction and understanding what went wrong and what could be designed into a system, the people in the business know this discussion that's going on among the engineers? I mean, this is not the first time that the engineers discuss things that the business people overlook, right?
Yeah, I mean, personally, and this is, my time. I almost spent almost 10 years at Boeing, and during my time, I heard, quite a few people retire say, there used to be an engineering company, and it's not an engineering focused company anymore, and that's maybe that's one of the things that why companies get into the trouble, financially, is they don't stick to their core business, and they got to go back to the core business. If we're for an engineering company, then we stick to that, and that seems to be I did not watch the film, but I think that's kind of where the perspective of the film is coming from. That it's they didn't listen to who is providing them with the problems, and they just went ahead with their own solutions, and they didn't listen to the folks that they should have. So excellent. Thanks for sharing that, Brian.
You're welcome. And one of the first private astronauts that paid to go to the space station, wasn't he? His expertise was financial engineering.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
But all I got was one course in economics in my engineering curriculum. So
yeah. So it's most likely, my perspective here is most likely a business decision. So, what did it say? Design shortcuts meant to make a new plane seem like an old, familiar one, or to blame, right? That's kind of the IEEE article. And anyway, I kind of threw it in because it goes along with, okay, you gotta look at the big picture. Systems to systems, can't change one aspect of a particular system and think it's not going to have residual risk. And that goes for cybersecurity as well. You may change and fix something here, but it may have some consequences to when you're trying to maybe do something later on or have your system perform.
Just got a quick comment here on the previous. The B-52H Stratofortress, the final variant of it that used the turbofan engines, the TF-33 from Pratt & Whitney, it had a similar issue because it had way too much thrust. So they can't take off at full power. or it will pitch up and stall. So they had a very simple mechanical solution to the problem. They actually have a thrust gate that they're required to set that will prevent the throttle from moving to full power. So they set the gate for whatever thrust they've calculated is required for takeoff. And so when they take off, they don't have to look down. They just push all the way forward, and the thrust gate will physically prevent the throttle from going any further. And that was their simple solution to prevent the same problem that MCAS was trying to solve on the B-52. And this was done in the 1960s.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with B-52. I used to count rivets on them when I was stationed upstate New York in Griffiths Air Force Base. That was, I would be out there on the flight line. But so you brought up a good point too. So there's this manual, workaround, let's say. And when we're thinking about criticality analysis too, we rate them, and we could put mitigations and countermeasures in. And when we're talking, through that in an exercise, that's very important. I'll go back to let's say satellite communications. So you may have a feature on a terminal where you can auto tune a frequency or something of that nature, right? Okay, you may have redundancies of that tuner or something, or maybe it's kind of like an amplifier. Maybe there's knobs, that it can be manually turned. Well, if the automated feature fails, do you have that ability to go maybe in a rack somewhere and turn something manually? Is there a workaround? So those are things you kind of want to keep in the back of your mind. In this case, it worked great for B-52, and it was implemented, and it was part of just the overall process. And that was back in the 60s, right? So think about that. Even when it comes to cybersecurity aspects or something maybe electronic in nature, is there some kind of manual or just a not automatic or not electronic process that you can put in place to help mitigate those risks, or provide, let's say, a countermeasure if an adversary comes up with something to try and take down your system?
The real solution was to have not canceled the 757 or restart production of it, because they were trying to turn the 737 into a 757, which it is not. And that was really the fundamental problem. If they had left the 737 alone as a short range, short size airplane, it would be fine. When they tried to extend it and add all these other things to make it like a 757, that's when it failed.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm hearing. And, I'll probably put on the movie tonight or something.
That's why they're bringing up that they're now reading the MMA in order to create a new 757, essentially.
Yeah, well, it's much needed. So, all right,
Yeah,
go ahead.
talking about the interaction between automatic and manual control on the MAX problem, the 737 MAX, it wasn't really a complete automatic solution, but the fatal flaw was the pilots in the control loop were not informed about what the automatic system was going to do in the event that it got outside the control envelope.
So the training piece of it, that human factor training piece.
I suppose when your plane is crashing and you can go into panic mode, pull out the manual and read the documentation.
Yeah. That should be done before. Yeah, it should be done well beforehand. You should know, if you got this flaw, this is what you to anticipate. Not this, you don't pull out the training manual when you're in the middle of.
They ripped the manual. That was the tragic part, because part of the thing was they were trying to sell it to the airlines as you don't need a new type rating, and the only way they could do that is by keeping the procedures the same. So any talk about test was removed in order to prevent the need for a new type rating, and that's where the fatal flaw in the training was.
Yeah, we see that too with parts too. I could tell you when you have to recertify a new system, if you somehow change, lot numbers, and if you change like part, even like when you're talking, even at the microelectronics level, sometimes, you may have higher performance capabilities on, let's say, a new chip, but if you start introducing new technology, and guess what, you have to have it, let's say, recertified, reaccredited, all those different flavors of things you have to do. And then that costs money. So it costs money, and it also costs schedule. And so project and program managers, they don't want to do that, right? So they'll try and use parts that may not be there. Some parts are not being made anymore. So you have to go kind of from the gray market. So there's an issue with parts too, with that type of mentality. And that's a real problem. So that's kind of the other work I do, supply chain risk management, which is a good segue into the next chart, supply chain risk management. We're seeing it now quite a bit with software, right? With SolarWinds and Log4j, but you need to do this. Just not take the DoD and the real critical national security stuff aside, but you really need to get insight into what companies provide you to operate your business. We're seeing it with COVID too, because of things just aren't available. You can't put your product to market because your components and subcomponents aren't available. Here, in the world I work in, we've got at least a good pulse on the defense industrial base, but we've been watching it deteriorate over years. We've seen things such as what I call predatory acquisitions, where companies are being acquired solely for their technology, and they're being acquired by foreign companies. So we have things in place, such as CFIUS. That's Council on Foreign Investment in U.S. Interests. Those types of things, can help, but sometimes they're too late to need. And then if I kind of go back to the beginning, if you're not identifying what's most critical to begin with, then how can you even build a case, let's say, to stop some of these activities? I mentioned, there's some I guess interest in FPGAs and ASICs, and well, there's some things that can be done, in the pre-silicon, phase. There's things you can be asking of your tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers, to provide you with some documentation or some kind of level of assurance that what they're going to provide you is not only of quality and reliability, but it's free from defects. To use an example that's been in the news, it's been a number of years, but Amazon had these blue phones that were for sale and for purchase very openly. It came installed with the malware already installed on the phone. I mean, they're like $60, so they weren't very costly. But the only reason that it came to light, at least it did in a timely manner, was there was a security company that bought a couple of these burner phones to take over overseas. And while they had them plugged into their corporate network over the weekend, they saw all this traffic being exfiltrated and going back to China. It's a very odd behavior. So what any good security company does, they started doing analysis, and they found out it was this third-party software that was built, it's basically third-party code that was running, within the firmware when the logic devices were programmed, and it was supposed to be just only for a test capability. The company said, okay, we meant to shut that off. Amazon had a problem, again, a few months later in the same instance with it. And anyway, so you got to be really mindful of that. It's a reality. It's not science fiction. It happens, and it's happening more frequently. So be mindful of, not just what's in your traditional, let's say, hardware type supply chain, but also the idea of what may be in, software and firmware. Again, say the chart says identify the hardware and software that's most critical. And if you do these types of activities in your criticality analysis, and include software, when you do a criticality analysis, you'll at least have some insights. Like, yeah, we cannot operate without this. For most space systems, it's almost, you almost have this long laundry list of things, especially when it comes to software. It's like everything for the software side is critical. You have to have it, otherwise it won't function. So this brings up this idea of a software bill of materials, right? We got this SBOM now, but I'll talk a little about that in the future slides. So here's a RAND study, for reference if you want to, see the importance of your supply chain. It's becoming ever more crucial, and there's, it's an overall, supply chain risk management process, but just go beyond the FPGAs, and there's suppliers. I think the term needs to be interpreted a little bit more broadly. There's software being installed in manufacturing facilities that you're just not aware of. You can ask for that. And there's some companies you may have to pay extra and a premium to get some kind of pedigree of security. But if your program or your company really relies on it, it's worth investment. And at least you should be asking those questions. There's industries that have required this. This idea that you have to provide this ingredients list of what's in your software, for a number of years. So it's not something that's totally new, especially when it comes to SCADA and ICT systems, those systems that may actually control mechanisms. And so it's not entirely something that is unusual, and it's something that we should be asking for it. Whether it's done by an independent third party or, self-affirm. I've been seeing some traffic on self-affirmation, or some kind of government entity. This is something that should be done just as a good best practice, especially for any of your critical components. So I mentioned software, right? And this kind of came about, I think, of dealing with more of open source software, but there's a number of things that should be done. I'll just jump into it. So code analysis can be done either your static analysis or dynamic. Static, you have to have access to the source code, and then dynamic is how the code actually runs in the operational environment. There's a number of a wide range of tools out there that do both of these types of activities. Not one tool does it all. So you'd have to get a mix of tools, and depending, within, say the systems and the platforms they operate. So the more complex the system you have, the more wide range of tools you may have to employ against some of these. It can get very costly. Again, these tools aren't cheap. Expertise to know how to use the tools and actually produce valuable reports. And then you got to think, okay, then you have to actually fix the defects that cost money. But so if you're really focused about this type of work and focus on what's most important to your business or mission, then maybe you can reduce some of those costs. The other piece of this is the supplier assessment piece. Okay, you got to know who's providing these components to you, and the software is nothing, it's not different either. So you have to really be aware of not only just the open source software that may be resident in your systems, but to a large extent, anything that is running software or firmware on your components. You have to ask those types of questions. So the standard, I'll drop that in the chat too when we take a little break here, is the IEC 62443 series. And it's really was relative to industrial control and automation type systems, like those SCADA type systems I mentioned previously. This was a process already built in. So when SolarWinds happened, I can tell you the folks, companies like Honeywell, they fared fairly well because they already had this affirmation, these list of ingredients in their software, because they had to provide that to whoever was buying their industrial control system components types of things. Okay. So SCADA systems are the SCADA, like if you're a power company or an electric company, and you're running systems that manually operate. It could be gate, it could be valves, it could be those types of systems. Sorry, Santosh. So here you see the chart on the software life cycle and how you have to be cognizant of the whole entire process. Oh wait, did I go back? There. So we're missing a few steps here, and one of those we didn't do a threat assessment and we didn't do a vulnerability assessment. Those types of things need to be address too. But in the short amount of time, it has to speak, we couldn't possibly do that. You can get your threats from a number of different sources, at least your intel that you pull from. If you're a company, a large company, you probably have your own team that they're constantly looking, for threats, what we call OSINT, open source intelligence. But really, when you're talking about a system that we're doing a decomposition on, it's really specific to that mission or that system. It's not just an overall threat. There's the difference between a threat and a vulnerability. There's lots of threats out there, but if you don't, let's say, if you're not running a particular application or on a particular platform, you may not be vulnerable to that. And then so the risk equation is, threat times vulnerability times likelihood is, equals like the overarching risk. When we do a criticality analysis and we're kind of doing the threat assessment piece, you'll see if we get to it a little bit later that there's a little bit difference between the likelihood and the consequence. They kind of get lumped together. But I always like to add frequency. Okay, what's the frequency that this may occur? Because you may see instances in the past where it comes up, right? Quite a bit. And so I would try and put the frequency in there because that can really give you some idea of, it's a little bit more than just a likelihood where it is not so quantitative, and sometimes likelihood is really just kind of a guess. You're just throwing darts at it. But then also I like to throw in when you're doing a threat assessment and a vulnerability assessment through in the process is, okay, do you have enough intel to figure out if your adversary's motivation, are they motivated to harm your system at a particular point in time? Or if it's a competitor, how aggressive are they with trying to steal your IP, right? And an example I could use is, if, like I said before, if you have an internet-facing system, you're probably already, compromised, and there's probably someone in your system already, right? At least that's the assumption I go with. But is a nation state or someone else really kind of motivated at this point to do something? In this case, if you're a small or medium-sized company, yeah, maybe they're willing to take a risk. Or even if you're a large company, if it's just kind of the corporate espionage and IP theft, maybe they're pretty willing to do it. But if you're developing something that's critical to national security and maybe getting the FBI or the federal authorities involved, maybe they're not so eager to turn on that switch right away and cause you harm. They may have stolen all of your intellectual property, but let's say maybe they're not so much eager to totally degrade or destroy some of your systems. So, all right, I slipped through that chart too quick. Hold on. So kind of just summarizing the this I guess part of my discussion is you got to conduct analysis. How you do it. There's lots of methodologies out there. You can tailor best to whatever your business is probably the my best recommendation. If you're in the DoD, you've got to follow certain criteria, and I'll provide some of the resources, like I said, in the chat, and at least provide you links to those types of resources. And then also you want to protect holistically. Just don't think of it as, the cybersecurity piece of it. Think of it larger. Information security covers all these different areas. It covers the gates, guards, and guns piece of it too. And then also the recurring theme too is training. You folks have to know what to be looking for, whether it's doing these types of analysis or understanding the big picture, that systems type of view and approach. That information should be shared, widely as best as you can. To go back to the pilot training. Well, if the pilots were trained in this area, when aircrafts get delivered, there's training facilities. Yeah, 737's been around a long time, but maybe it should have been known and training provided. Okay, it's going to cost us money to add this training, sessions and these training features in, but it would have, saved lives in the long run, right? So that kind of the end of the briefing part that I had ready to go. If you want to, I'll be willing to take some questions, and if you kind of want to go through an exercise, I've got some other charts that we can go over a little bit of a little mock exercise if you'd like. Any other questions on the chat here?
Scott, just one last comment about the 737 situation.
Mm-hmm.
From a systems point of view, in a pilot's perspective, it's probably not the best idea to have one plane handle in a special fashion.
Yeah. Why only this aircraft? Can we?
On the user interface. So, this sounds like an engineering software design flaw where they didn't really take into consideration the user interface for the entire flight envelope. I mean, if you're going to replace hardware with software, it should be invisible.
Yeah, it should be transparent. Well, and there should be another. I mean, just from my perspective, I'm not not an expert in these systems, but wouldn't there be other things that you would put in place and other mechanisms? It wouldn't just be this one software approach to it, right?
Right. There's only so much that the pilots can handle from a human performance perspective.
So do we have any other general questions or?
Can you repeat the contact information and from your last slide?
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
make sure
sorry.
you send it to everyone, because the reason we have gotten none of your chat comments is because you have set it to hosts and panelists only, likely, as opposed to everyone setting. That's what happened. We didn't get the very first thing you were going to put in there, which was this, whatever that acronym was at the beginning. You put that.
Yeah, this is not my Zoom session. So let me go in and see where my acronyms are, my list.
And the only thing I wanted to comment on was this presentation is very timely in terms of what's happening in the world, namely the Russian, Freudian slip there, Russian invasion of Ukraine and their cyber attacks that have targeted Ukraine, which of course is not us, but it's crippled them. And there's a lot of expectation, suspicion that we may be next. So any thoughts about that, given the fortuitous, I guess, timely nature of your presentation of it occurring right when this stuff is happening right now, as Russia's bombing Ukraine apparently as of today?
I mean, I purposely didn't go into any of the cyber stuff, but what you just looked at the historical activities that happened in the past. I know you were on the call earlier, and it's what we'd call probing or softening a target. It's something we did in the first Gulf War with telecommunication systems. So it's not this isn't a new tactic or technique. The interesting thing though is some of the RF capabilities that the last time Russia was interested in the Crimea. They don't have the concerns for safety and who's hanging around their antennas and systems that we do. So there's a lot of open source material out there on those types of things.
The only other comment I want to make is it's surprising how much lack of security and cyber hygiene that people practice. Simple things like they think just because you use SSL or TLS, HTTPS to log into your mail server securely, the email is somehow encrypted. It is not. It is clear text. Once it goes past your mail server in general, yeah, there may be specific instances where it may be encrypted between providers, but generally speaking, it's not. And people don't realize you have to use S-MIME, Secure Mine, and other similar technologies in the security certificate in order to encrypt people don't realize that they'll send their PII, personal identifying information, credit card number, social security number, passport, whatever, as attachments across email, not realizing. So simple things like that. It's astonishing how many people are not paying attention to how much they're putting themselves at risk by those simple actions.
Yeah, and then there's been this big, a lot of people use VPNs now, and they go, "Oh, I'm using VPN." Yeah, well, that protects the traffic, right? But if your machine is compromised, then guess what? It's behind all the traffic. The actual what's risen on your machine that is not protected, right? So.
And if you're using a VPN to send unsecure email, once it gets past the VPN server, it's still unsecure. I mean, so that does nothing to protect so you got to look at exactly what the path your data is taking.
So with that in mind, has the design of software progressed beyond defense in depth to, if you're going to assume that intruders have already compromised your system, maybe the design of the system should assume good faith rather than assuming that the unknown is an enemy?
I don't know, maybe I misinterpreted your response, but I would assume the opposite. And that's where we get this idea of zero trust architecture now, where you don't assume any interaction, between applications, between processes on your system are secure. So are you saying we advocate for assuming trust or the opposite?
Well, I guess paradoxically it would be both, because I'm assuming let's design systems without any information being vulnerable, but trust but verify for everything internally in the system as well as externally. So no compromise would be fatal to the system.
Yeah, I kind of when I brought this book up, this background filter is just killing it. Yeah, chaos engineering. I think I've got a link for that too. That's exactly what the folks at Netflix decided to do when they figured, okay, we know we're going to have these failures. We're just going to build it into where, okay, we know we're going to fail. And let's build the systems to be, let's say proactive instead of reactive on it.
So thank you for presenting this. And is your survey going to be available as well as a transcript in your link?
Yes. And let me see if I said there was a dead link. Which one was that, Santush? The RAND one or the DAU one?
It was the guidebooks URL, the PPP equals,
Okay.
and right before impact analysis. That's
will allow me to drop files in here. I've been on Teams an awful lot, so I'm not sure if does Zoom let me drop files?
if you have co-host.
Yeah, I think that file transfer seems to be disabled.
Okay.
But I copy your a chat posting to everyone.
Okay.
So already, if you're okay, I can we can post all your posting the links here afterwards on our website.
Okay.
Along with the video.
Yeah, I've got some better I can give you a more instead of an ad hoc list, I can give you a more extensive list of references and documents.
Because afterwards we post a video, but we also have post the some of the additional information for the speaker on our website as a blog. So we can put, and then we send a link to everyone. To the registered attendee. And actually, you mentioned about this is not your Zoom, but actually, for selecting everyone, that's actually for the speaker. It's the same. It really have almost the same level. as the host.
Okay.
So I don't know why you cannot select everyone, but I copy everything you posted there, and afterwards we'll post on the website as well. Of course, you say you have something you can send to me. We'll post it there so that people have a complete list.
That sounds good. Yeah, I've got a better, a cleaner list and just, give you the whole laundry list of, it has all the reference documents and what's required too. I'd stay away from all the policy type stuff. I didn't think that'd be so interesting. We know we have to do it, and we don't have time really even we didn't do the exercise piece of it, but there's steps in the process to take, and it's all well documented. You don't, unless you're doing it for a program in particular, you don't have to, go ahead and follow the exact process. And in fact, you can expand on it and you can tailor it as needed.
Just heads up, some of at least 2 of the URLs you posted are dead links, and many of them are repeated. It's taking you to the same page. So just FYI.
Okay. Well, apologies for that. I'll get a better list to Ken.
Yeah, then we'll post it the complete list later tonight or whenever Scott provided, in the next couple of days. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll get it to you.
Okay. Thank you. So folks, this is a great opportunity. This is very exciting talk. So I think you are all, your microphone are all enabled, so you can unmute yourself and ask your question. So while we're waiting, actually, you mentioned about the VPN, but you see VPN, as Santosh also mentioned, it's secure, but also not secure because it still goes through the VPN provider, and the provider has the information. And if a user not careful, even though you're secure, but if you type something, reveal your personal information, is still not secure.
The issue not so much that the VPN can't be trusted. Even if you could trust a VPN and it was, Mother Teresa VPN service, whatever. The issue is once it gets past the VPN, all the VPN is doing is hiding where you are and who our ISP is. It doesn't hide what you're sending through once it gets past the VPN. So if you're sending stuff unsecurely through the VPN, all you're doing is you're sending information that should not be going out to the public through a VPN, and it's ultimately coming out of the VPN at the other end and being leaked that way. That's the point I was trying to make.
Yeah, it just provides the tunnel.
Yeah. And also personally, I think also some people are talking about, whether this VPN provider is trustworthy. That's your information, or they have your information. So
the announcement I'd like to make is using a VPN to connect to Facebook and then publicly posting all your personal info on Facebook through that VPN.
Yeah, good example.
Yeah, and actually, Scott, while people are waiting for more questions, actually, when you mentioned about this company have some kind of evaluation for supply chain, and you have to ask about certain question to make sure it's secure. But is there anything like index? Is a company is any rating for a company being considered safe or not safe, or certain level, like for restaurant you have the Michelin ratings. Is there anything like this for company supply chain provider?
There's some newer companies that are out there that provide that type of service. One is Blue White. I can drop it in a link, that provide some types of services. The consulting, the big 4 consulting companies have kind of gotten into that field. You can't. It's only as let's say it's perishable data. It's only as good as maybe their last inspection or things that it's not some of it's not very timely. Okay. So yeah, Blue White is they're done. I want to make sure I get a good link here. They've put out some things where they kind of the service where they can rack and stack. Let's see.
If you want to post things in the chat, you can select panelist or everyone. There's a drop menu you can select. Yeah, it has nothing to do with host or the speaker.
Okay, now I get it. Was it attendees?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that it was a separate panelist. That's what you were saying. Okay. So
Yeah.
you were just doing, but yeah, there's other companies kind of getting into this field. It's you know, there's but there's no like one stop shop. You know, I've got a Bloomberg terminal to kind of wonder, okay, when I talked about the acquisition type stuff and, you know, the ownership piece of it, but there's not one, you know, holistic, you know, okay, this is the product I buy or this is the service I get. I can get all the feeds that I need to get. But it's, you know, it's a growing area, and I guess maybe there's a business opportunity there if people could figure out. I think it's just gotten so, the problem's gotten so wide and broad that I don't think any one company can even do it at this point. I think it's you know, too large of a task to take on because
Yeah,
each
you know,
go ahead.
yeah, it's a little bit like you know, on the browser, when you type HTTPS, you know, there's a lock icon, and you know, at different level, if you reach a more information secure level, and you have the different information there for your level of trustworthiness, you know, something like that. Well, I mean, yeah, I think very interesting what you mentioned about the consulting thing and the web page. But it is related to my next question. You know, how much you think? You know, how much, you know, for different size of company, what's probably the proper ratio for investment into cybersecurity protection versus the revenue? You know, maybe 1%, 2%, 5%. Those kind of things. Is there any kind of a rule of thumb, you know, for this kind of investment?
There isn't. I mean, when if companies like Gartner and Forrester, they'll put out surveys, you know, because they've come in from the IT side, but they've also covered the cybersecurity piece of it. Yeah, they look at a good spend for IT is what, at least a minimum of 10%. But then if you're chunking, you know, cybersecurity out of it, how much does cybersecurity get? So I would, you know, I would obviously go higher. And I mentioned the mergers and acquisition side of the house. When you're doing a merger and acquisition, your cyber risk may be well, your liability, let's say, would be well beyond what your purchase price is. So it becomes like, well, why are we going to invest in it? And I, you know, I would really try and focus on the aspect. Okay, that's why I try and focus on what's most important. The overall cybersecurity spend, I think, is increasing. Obviously, you know, just look at the numbers, you know, year after year after year. But a lot of times it just gets, you know, it gets lumped into the IT budget, let's say, because maybe it's the CIO that are the ones that are handling, you know, the cyber piece, and the CISO or it's a director of information security would report up there. So they're the ones that can control the purse strings. You know, you mentioned though a little bit of, okay, well, is there any regulatory type oversight? Well, the SEC is getting more involved with these types of activities, and they're applying ratings and S&P Global. So when you're talking from you know, publicly traded type of environment, yes, you know, there's definitely more regulatory and you know, I mentioned just some industries are better than others at it. The energy sector, they were kind of self-regulating themselves in a way. Financial services, they're probably the caliber, they're probably the gold standard and the high bar that everyone would look to meet. You know, I would probably take, okay, well, let's if any financial services company out there, if you can, you know, pin them down and see what their cybersecurity spend is, I'd probably use that as a hey, this is probably where we want to be as far as what percentage we should spend.
Okay, Scott, I think there are two questions here. One is from Randall. Did you see that in chat?
Servers.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Google had, you know, and Amazon, I mean, there's servers everywhere outside the United States. And Zoom, you know, I remember when Zoom kind of became popular and it was like, oh, wait a minute, they're, you know, you have to, you know, they came up with a service. Okay, you have to actually select, you want a US server for your Zoom platform, right? So I don't think there's inherently a problem. when you're talking about, information that's, property of the U.S. government or we're obligated to protect. That's maybe you get into those types of questions. But no, as a general rule, no, I wouldn't say that there's a problem with the servers being located outside the United States. I guess it would depend where, but everything's connected. So the physical location is less, at least from my perspective, less important than who has access to it, virtually and digitally, let's say.
Yeah, you are right, Scott. Actually, I also remember in the beginning, AIAA purchased this Zoom system, and there was a way you can select whether you want the server in China or in United States. You can choose. You're absolutely right. And did you see the second? Yeah.
Yeah, and
You want to-
they've come out with Zoom for Gov and all that, because those are FedRAMP approved,
Yeah.
and FedRAMP's the cloud certification. So I mean, if it's critical and to your business, or if you're a DoD type environment or even a federal government environment, and it's important, and you have to follow that guidelines, yes, then it's important. But I don't inherently see a problem. We didn't really talk about cloud much, but when you're hosting anything in the cloud or your applications, you're bringing your own security anyway. So it's not like you're just kind of relying on your cloud service provider to do that. Your apps and your data should be secured in a way that is protected anyway. So
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. I mean, that's the next level. Right now people, their company putting the system, app, and along with operating system, in the cloud. So there's a more security issue. But did you see the second question about? Oh, just come back to the Zoom. I think there are some companies they don't allow using Zoom app, but they allow the employee to use the Zoom on the website, but they don't allow you to use the app, to install the app. Okay, so there's in the Q&A box, there's a question. Did you see it from anonymous attendee?
You mentioned aerospace and pharma, SCM ISO required compliance. I didn't specifically address aerospace or pharma ISO required compliance. They have their own rules to go towards. Aerospace, I mentioned it briefly with ISO standards, the 27100 series is where when we talk about information security management program. So again, but ISOs are you have to pay. You probably can find some information about it online, but if you actually want the actual standards themselves, it's a required payment. But you could probably find enough training materials and things of that nature, just on white papers. There's just a wealth of knowledge out there these days that companies provide as as a service. You may have to go behind, provide your email address or something, but there's lots of white papers out there if there's something specific that you're interested in. With regards to pharma, pharma's, there's organizations here that I belong to, and pharma is well represented at these information security events, because of San Diego and in Irvine and even in Los Angeles. There's some big pharma type companies here, so there's quite a bit of it actually in this region. So if there's something that you want to get involved in, there's plenty of meetup type groups, and they're generally sponsored by security vendors and product vendors. But if you're on LinkedIn and you want to hit me up on LinkedIn, I could put you in touch with folks in that industry. It's growing. The need for cyber's been growing. They've been staffing like crazy within the past, I'd say 5 to 7 years that that I've been here at Aerospace. So.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, I met some of them. And, the pharma in Simi Valley. There are a couple of big pharma over there. And some company, I met some people from Simon Tech, or some company, but, they didn't really want to
come out to. Well, I'll try to talk to you there. I think Brian raised hand. I think Brian has a question, and then Randall has another question as well.
Yeah, Brian
Brian.
here. Just
Good, Brian.
with regard to the servers in the different countries, you know, engineers know that bits are the same internationally, but different countries have laws regarding data storage, and I think that's might be where the concern about the servers comes from.
Yeah, and so GDPR is the big one for anyone that's doing business in Europe, and that's, if you follow the news, that's why Google and Facebook. Oh, we might have to pull Facebook from Europe because their privacy protection laws are more strict. But if we go away from the privacy part, what about your IP, right? Well, if it's hosted in a country that is just stealing IP anyway, I wouldn't, I wouldn't want my information there. If it's sensitive, I think that's where it would come into the equation. How comfortable do you feel having it hosted someplace else? So maybe that answered it a little bit more.
Well, the question I had before that was, have you ever gotten a Google response that says your security certificate is out of date?
Yes, yeah.
But it's not out of date, and what's happening is that the security certificate is not trusted, but because of the multi-level nature of this, you can't tell if the website you're trying to contact has a bad security certificate, or if you do, or if the intermediate servers do. And I don't think that the average user is sophisticated enough to correct this problem, so they probably bypass it.
Yeah, and they just click anyway. Trust and click the site anyway.
Yeah, and then what?
And it's taking it's that risk-based decision. You're making the risk-based decision to go ahead and click it. I did see a question in here too about national. Do we have a national firewall like China? And personally, no, I don't think so. I mean, I'm more of kind of the internet and the Freedom Foundation type person. I think it should be open, and there should be some bounds on it, but definitely not. I wouldn't want a national firewall. I just think that would stifle innovation and creativity, and I just don't think that's the right approach. I mean, for security reasons, I just don't think I don't think that's the right answer. I think collectively we all can do better instead of just relying on, let's say government or some technology to help protect us at that level. That's just my own personal opinion though.
Well, individual systems administrators block IP address block because they detect threats coming from there, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's a service you can pay for. There's lots of free service out there. You can get that updated constantly. Correct. Blacklisting or the opposite approach, whitelisting, only allow these IPs and these ports, that kind of stuff. I hope we don't get to that level where it's kind of where you can only have to have whitelisting. But that's a solution, especially if you have to lock down certain segments of your network or certain machines in certain areas.
I mean, the people that run China, they must have a problem with something. Otherwise, their blockage of the internet would just simply be an imaginary problem. That why are they going to all this trouble to block an imaginary problem?
And like I said, I don't want to get to that level here.
Yeah, but I think that's a little bit political side, Yeah, so it's hard to comment on that. Yes, actually, Scott, well, I mean, Randall has a question, so maybe Randall, did you see it?
Sure.
What about the backup secure net?
As far as maybe can I expand on it, Randall? Come off mute again.
Randall, do you want to speak out? I mean, sometimes I noticed Randall might have some issue about the microphone. So while we're waiting for him to elaborate, I have a two question. And maybe you can comment. It's not actually the question. One is that now these days there are people renting the data center space. Then you can put your server to them, and they have the space for you, and they took care of all the security. Do you think that's had better security, or you suggest actually companies should have their own server in their own facility? And the second thing is, how do we comment it's the real hardware server, or the virtual server these days are very popular. So do you have any comment on the security in between those two?
So the first one, it sounded like I saw this question more expanded on-prem versus off-prem with kind of services built in. I guess it depends on your business model. If if it makes sense for you to provide to outsource it, definitely do that, because you may not, especially small and medium-sized business, they don't have the resources to fully staff a full, secure team to constantly be getting those feeds in, finding those IPs, that we just talked about. So it makes sense to use a service, and especially if they don't have the expertise for cloud. It's evolving, it's a changing technology, so you're going to constantly have to train your employees, and usually IT staff, it may be high turnover anyway. So I think it makes sense to outsource some of that, whether it's it's a bare metal outsourced off-prem type thing with some security services or not. Or the second part of it, I think I guess it's the same thing, maybe almost like kind of depends on what you think is best for it. The cloud, like I mentioned before, it's bringing your own security to it. So there's cases where it makes sense, where it's more secure, but also from the financial perspective, it makes sense not to lift and shift everything to the cloud, right? There's things that you may want to just keep on-prem, bare metal. The fact that Amazon offers S3 buckets and their offerings, they've got 9 times redundancy on their offering. That's very appealing, but then that comes with a cost too. You don't want to put everything in that. You don't need that high availability all the time, and you don't need all that redundancy. And so maybe some of the other types of systems. So I don't think it's right now we're at a one size fit all. Like it makes sense to move everything. Companies are feeling the pain of moving to the cloud. There's a lot of companies just moved everything, and applications don't work. We didn't really talk about ransomware at all, but one of the big things with ransomware too is that everyone thinks it's the data. Okay, we need to recover the data. Well, it's if you're getting a ransomware, pop up on your screen and a notice, and you're locked, chances are it's already probably been out there on the dark web. It's been exfilled. It's already being sold, or it's for sale. So you can go get it. You can get that data back. That's not the hard part. It's reconstituting those interfaces, how the applications interact. That's the hard part. That takes time. That's the long, pole in the tent when it comes to recovering from a cyber attack that's involving ransomware in particular. The data is, you get the data. That's probably not the hardest thing you have to deal with, but it's how those applications interact. And, sometimes that's just better having that, what you really need critical, let's say, in-house. So hopefully that answered the question. I know it's kind of a long answer.
Yeah. I mean, of course, these days the more things like the Dockers, those kind of things, I think Randall kind of expanded a little bit, elaborate.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah, I mean, we've got that. I mean, we've got what's called SIPRnet, right? But it runs on the backbone of your regular internet. It's just through encryption. If you're talking about a separate network, we've looked at all those types of things. But when you're talking about the long haul comms, it's still going to run on fiber that goes under the sea, right? Or underground. Maybe when we're talking future technologies and we're using satellites or some kind of other terrestrial means of besides satellites to communicate, maybe there's a good viable option for that. But we have the separate type of net for national security. It's just it's got to run on something else because the infrastructure isn't there, just built out for it. So
Yeah, actually, Scott, this question actually remind me experience. Maybe like 20 years ago, I was in East Coast, and what happened? There was suddenly there was a storm, a tornado, a touchdown, and then the city lost power. Everything, nothing worked, but one thing did work is the landline, the phone. It
copper,
was
yeah.
working. So then I was able to call a friend to get some help or something like that. So maybe that's something what Randall was kind of referred to. It doesn't have to be high tech like satellite or something basic but reliable. But you see, these days I noticed that even AT&T, they're abandoning the landline. Everything become internet. So maybe that's kind of risky. But you see, there's no more landline. So if anything disaster, there's no such thing. So, that experience gave me very strong impression. Something backbone, basic but still working.
Yeah, I am. I installed my own alarm system into my house in Seattle, and it was UL certified because I wanted it to be UL certified. But it was a landline, and that's the response capable. I didn't want to go with there's wireless technologies I could employ it on the sensors. I'm like, nope, I'm going to keep it all hardwired, copper wire. So, there's but that that was years ago, and I guess I have succumbed to no more landlines for me.
No more landline.
No.
Los Angeles, AT&T has ditched the landline. No more. Yeah. Brian has sorry. Can you take one more question from
Yeah,
Brian?
sure. Go ahead.
Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going to say the landline, typically the local exchanges are battery powered for reliability. That's what AT&T or the local phone companies installed. So that's why they're available when there's a power failure on the electrical grid. But the cell towers are not necessarily the same way because they're connected to the electrical grid. So
Yeah, I have a
yeah,
friend that during September 11, he was working in a company next to the cell phone tower, and because that the building Twin Tower has the cell tower on top of it, so there was no cell phone connection at all. He could not reach his family. His family was very worried about him because he worked right next to it. But there's no way they can reach it because the tower was knocked out. So yeah, maybe that's what you're saying, Brian. Yeah.
yeah. So who is overseeing the national redundancy of the security infrastructure for the nation?
Yeah, it falls under DHS, and they've come up with the critical infrastructure. What there's 16, let's say, industries that were created. Now I think they're, space. We're trying to be part of the critical infrastructure. Will probably be designated. I think if not, soon. So DHS, Homeland Security, is the one that's the responsibility falls under.
Yeah,
So, and then for the cybersecurity piece, that's CISA, CISA.
I see.
And the
Actually,
design of the internet is inherently reliable anyway.
Yeah.
Scott, you mentioned about satellite. So you mean that satellite is actually more reliable, for the internet or the 5G, 6G?
Well, it could be when you look
Okay,
at Starlink and OneWeb. I mean, it certainly could be. I mean, and I meant not just space. It could be other ways too. There could be other terrestrial instead of space, terrestrial type options we could look at. It wouldn't just have to be space. And I just looked at, it's still not Still not designated as a critical infrastructure. So be on the lookout for that. Space may be designated soon.
Yeah.
So,
But you know the recent news, right? The space has lost 40 satellites, starting satellite due to the solar storm.
yeah,
Solar
yeah.
and the atmospheric drop. We have a speaker, Dr. Henry Garrett from JPL. On March 5th, he's going to briefly talk about the physics. You know how the sun solar storm affect the atmosphere and the drag and cause the issue. You know, so I don't know. Is satellite more reliable, maybe more secure, but kind of physical condition, I don't know. You know.
Yeah, there's it's a big unknown right now.
Yeah.
I don't think space is I don't think it's as reliable or secure as terrestrial right now.
I thought it was more secure, but maybe not more reliable. But you're saying now, well, I don't know.
Well, if you can intercept the transmission and then decode it,
Yeah, RF, it's just RF signals. I mean, that's
otherwise
it's
you
not
have to tap.
magic. Right.
I see. Okay, folks, it's kind of late. Is anybody any question? I think we can, if any question, you're welcome to contact Scott, or you can let me know. I'll relate. And actually, there are a lot of very exciting things here. Actually, Scott didn't touch the ransomware much, and also the dark web, and also there's you know, like server security and those kinds of things. So hopefully, you know, Scott will have time come back again. Pick up some, you know, to tell us more about the exciting stories.
Yeah, and I'll be sure to give you some a good sheet of references for some
Okay.
of the topics I covered, and
That's
with
wonderful.
additional guidance.
Will do. All
Thank
right,
you,
so
Scott,
folks,
for the
thank you so
presentation.
much.
All right, thanks. Bye bye.
Courageous
bye-bye.
man to do so.
What did you say, Brian?
Thank you, Scott, for your presentation. It takes
Oh.
it takes great courage to do so.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, Scott is a good speaker, very good speaker. Yeah,
Thanks.
it's hopefully we can have more opportunity with you next time.
I look forward to looking at your materials that you are sending out.
All right, have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you.
Scott, still on or drop off?